I have always been here.
Good afternoon or good evening, everyone, and welcome back to the Ambassadorial Wing and another installment of the Council of the Ones Babylon 5 review. And hope you all are having a great Friday afternoon. Hope you all have had a good week. It's the start of a brand new weekend and hopefully a time of rest for all of you. And, well, today is going to be a little bit different because for several different reasons, the majority of the council is either at work or is on vacation or is otherwise indisposed. So today we're going to take a break from the normal review. I know that we were gone last week, and I do want to give you all an update as to why. Um, for those of you that follow me on social media, um, I can't remember if I posted this or not, but sadly, we suffered a loss amongst the ambassadorial family a couple weeks ago, and my my mom's brother, my uncle, passed away. So I was away. Obviously, we did not broadcast last week so that I could spend time with the family, and so we could take care of a few family matters in regards to my uncle's death. But we are back and glad to be back, obviously. And as I said, with the majority of the council indisposed, it's just going to be me today. But I did not want to miss another broadcast. I did not want to not miss do another stream and everything. But I didn't feel right in continuing the review of season 5 of Babylon 5 without the rest of the council here. So today we're just going to have a little one-on-one time. And today got I hope an interesting topic, a topic that will be of interest to everyone and will be a start of some maybe hopefully some good conversation. And this is honestly something I've never really discussed in the 2 years that I have been covering Babylon 5 here on my channel. And we're going to discuss why or how Babylon 5 has influenced my life both as a geek and as a person. So, and to the chat, good afternoon, Drake Tungsten. Drake, it is good to see you, bud. Appreciate you popping by this afternoon. I hope you enjoy the stream. And as always, if this is your first visit to the Ambassador Wing, or if you are a regular attendee here, if you are part of the Ambassador Wing, glad that you are here today and hope you enjoy the stream. But if this is your first visit and you do enjoy the stream and you want to check out some of my other content that I have done just on my own and also with the council and various other people, go check that out. And if you like what I'm doing here, hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell so that you will be notified when I go live or when I do an upload. So that being the quote unquote shilling for the stream for this afternoon, let's jump right in. Why? How has Babylon 5 influenced me as a person and, well, also as a geek? For those of you who have followed me for the last couple of years since I've been reviewing this series, you will know that this is a series I have a great passion for. It is a sci-fi series that I have always been a huge fan of. And it's something that was a big part of my life growing up as a teen in the 90s. And I think there is a multitude of reasons why I am such a fan of Babylon 5. For one, it's a very expansive world. It is a very elaborate world filled with so many interesting characters and dynamics at play. It is truly a timeless work of fiction. But at the same time, while it is timeless, it is also very timely because it does discuss a great many dynamics that are at work in our current culture and in our past as well. And the one thing, one of the many reasons I love B5 is that it has, while it's not a perfect portrayal, it is a very hopeful and a very optimistic portrayal of our future. A future where we have seemingly put aside our differences in terms of theological and social discussion and what are more contention. We aren't divided as a people in terms of race or our thoughts on faith. Although I would imagine Eve, and you can tell that there is still some contention, but it isn't as widespread, and it's much more. It's discussed in a more diplomatic fashion, or debated in a much more diplomatic fashion, rather than us resorting to bashing each over the head with a stick or a club or a sword or whatever the case may be. And very quickly to the chat, another good friend of the channel, Jeff B. Jeff, is good to see you, bud. Appreciate you stopping in and hope you enjoy the stream this afternoon. So, but with that first point that I just brought up, how has it influenced me as a person? It has it has shown me that better understanding can be reached through conversation and dialogue rather than through brute force. Although there are times when there is no alternative than to resort to brute force or to armed conflict, if you prefer. But the thing that I have always striven for, and one of the things that Babylon 5 has had an influence upon me in, is that I'm more likely to try and talk things out with an opposing party, or maybe not even an opposing party. Maybe it's not even a party that's hostile to me, but maybe we simply have a differing opinion, and it allows. What Babylon 5 has shown me is that you want to reach out with an olive branch to the opposing party and say, here's why we disagree, but where are points of agreement that we can broaden and create a space where we can have a dialogue. And if you look at the dynamics within Babylon 5, this is very much the case, because you have so many different beings from different cultures, different species at play within Babylon 5, that they realize that the best way to keep from another war breaking out or more armed conflict breaking out is to try and have a place where they can gather and discuss their agreements without resorting to armed conflict. And that is something that has always been very appealing to me as a person. Now, I will admit, there are times when I have tried to be diplomatic with others, when I've tried to extend an olive branch with others and try and find common ground, find some sense of commonality with them. But unfortunately, that's not always possible. There is sometimes just too much in between myself and the other party where it's best just to end that association rather than trying to butt our heads further. And I think the reason why B5 has been such an influence upon me in that respect is, as I have grown older, I have come to realize that there are some arguments, there are some discussions that you simply cannot win. There are going to be times when you just can't reach the other person. and it's just better to cut your losses rather than continue to butt heads with the other person. And I'll give you one example from the series for those of you that are familiar with it. And I imagine everybody here that's watching live and those of you that'll catch us on the replay later. If you look at the dynamic between the Minbari and humans, here are two races that were locked in a absolutely bloody, horrific war, and it was quite literally the motivation for the construction of the Babylon stations, and eventually we did get it right. But two groups that were so diametrically opposed to one another, two groups where there was so much blood in between them, and yet they came to understand that to avoid further war, to avoid further loss of life that neither side could potentially afford, they needed to have a place where they could talk things out with one another. And that in turn had an influence upon the races surrounding them, in particular the races that made up the League of Non-Aligned Worlds. And that is part of the influence that Babylon 5 had on me in terms of how I wanted to structure and format my YouTube channel and my presence in social media in general, was to be able to create a space where people that might have differing viewpoints, not necessarily hostile viewpoints, but simply have differing viewpoints, could gather together and discuss matters of pop culture or matters of a greater importance in their lives freely and without fear of retribution or without fear of being browbeaten by the other party, whether that was myself or another group that they were meeting with. And I like to believe, and I say this with no undue pride whatsoever, that I have been relatively successful in that end. Now, as I mentioned a few minutes ago, have I been wholly successful in that endeavor? No, because here's the thing. There are some times when you're going to meet a person that's completely implacable that you're simply not going to be able to reach, or there is just points of contention that cannot be broken through to. And it's better to just back away amiably and say, look, we simply cannot come to any type of agreement or anything where we can talk things over with one another. And as I said, I like to believe that I've been at least partially successful in that endeavor. But one of the other factors of B5 that I've always been fascinated with is the world building and the multifaceted nature of this world. When JMS, J. Michael Straczynski, created this universe, he populated with a plethora of fascinating characters, both individuals and races alike, not to mention a very deep and rich lore of this universe and everything, in particular with the dynamic of the um, elder races called the First Ones, and very much in particular with the race known as the Vorlons and with the Shadows. Because what JMS was trying to do was he wasn't trying to create another Star Trek copycat by any stretch of the imagination. He wanted to create a fresh new world that may have been inspired by Star Trek, but wasn't necessarily a one-to-one copycat of it. And with the introduction of alien races that are millennia years old, are technologically advanced, and have a perspective on the universe around them that other races wouldn't, you create a lot of fertile ground for very good storytelling. And we as humans have always been fascinated about life beyond the Earth. But we've never really, I mean, I imagine there have been people who have, but by and large, we've never considered how do you interact with and potentially have to combat a race that is literally hundreds of millions of years old. And that is not an easy answer to create, for the simple fact that there are some forms of life that are going to be wholly different from us. They're going to be so foreign to us that there is no space for. And in one particular instance, you have a very enigmatic and somewhat um, un, un, unwitting or unwittingly humorous race in the case of the Vorlons. Because the one main character that we interact with the most, at least through seasons 1 through 3, is of course Ambassador Kosh. And here is a being who has literally or most likely been alive for millennia. He is a very, very old individual. And he has seen so much, he has experienced so much that he is ready to die. Or he will eventually get to a point where he will sacrifice his life for a greater good. And there's a moment in season 3, and it's a moment that I know most people are familiar with, but I will bring it up here, where you have Kosh interacting with Captain Sheridan, Captain John Sheridan, and it's all done through a vision of John's father. And you have this being who has literally been alive for millennia, and he's afraid to die. And that is truly something fascinating, that you have a being that has been alive for millennia, if not more, and he is afraid to die. But in the end, when it's all said and done, his death was a catalyst for great change and positive change for the most part in the universe around him. Because it's through Kosh's death that the Vorlons are forced to come out of their seclusion, come out of their hiding, although they start to cause quite a bit of fracas across the board for everyone. And it's a hard thing to deal with, because when you have a race like the Vorlons, who are obviously technologically more advanced, not to mention physiologically more advanced than us as humans, it's no small feat to take out a race of beings, not to mention just a single one of them, when you're at a disadvantage, when you're having to fend off forces that you didn't know possibly could exist. But how has this had an influence upon me as a person in terms of what JMS created, in terms of the lore of the Babylon 5 universe, and in particular with the first ones, and most definitely with the Vorlons? It's helped. the one thing that's really helped me to understand is that being afraid, having emotion, and having doubts is not solely a human condition or a human trait. It's something that even non-humans most likely would experience. They may react to it differently than we would per se, but all the same, those feelings are there. And then the little bit of fiction writing that I have done myself, I have tried to employ that into my writing, particularly with various characters who are very, very much inhuman, but you want them to have that layer of humanity to them, even if they are not Homo sapien. You want them to be able to feel, to emote, to have doubts and fears, hopes and dreams, and all those things across the board. And that's a good thing because it makes the world that you are creating much more rich and the characters that you have made much more relatable. And that for me is also another reason why I am such a massive fan of Babylon 5. Because, even at my age, I like to believe that maybe, just maybe, I will live long enough to see humanity finally make contact with extraterrestrial life. And I would hope that whoever or whatever the race may be is, that we might be able to establish a dialogue with them and maybe have some sort of friendship with them based on a common trait, and that is, of course, humanity. But the other, I mean, I could probably spend the next 2 or 3 hours explaining why I love Babylon 5 as much as I do, but I want to keep this stream relatively concise, and I want to just hit upon the main points that I really feel are pertinent here rather than just rambling on forever on and on and on and on. The other reason I have been so powerfully, and I think influenced by Babylon 5 is the characters. And I'll name a few in particular that have had a real impact on me. One that I've already I have mentioned is, of course, Ambassador Kosh. I mean, as Jeff indicated in his message, there was a time in my YouTube career, quote unquote, that I did go by the moniker Ambassador Kosh. Now that has long since passed, I'm simply now the ambassador because, well, I don't have to deal with copyright claims and so on from from YouTube and from the creator of the show, that of course being JMS. Ambassador Kosh was a creation of his own genius and his own brilliant mind. So I did not want to infringe upon that. But the reason why I have such a fondness and such a respect for Kosh is that even though he is several millennia years old, he has not lost the capability to feel real, genuine human emotions. And for a being of his species, of his. And Kosh is so rich and so intriguing as a character. He brings a wealth of dynamics through his portrayal as the character. And honestly, for me, the reason why, as I mentioned, I have such a deep appreciation and respect for Kosh is the fact that he does display genuine human emotions. And for me, a character that has lived literal millennia and honestly, give me a minute. I lost my track of that, guys. No, I'm sorry. With a character that has lived as long as Kosh has, and for him to develop human emotions over time, and him to form attachments to particular humans, that being, of course, Leah Alexander and John Sheridan, and to a certain degree, Delenn. Uh, but the thing for me with Kosh is that we never see his true face. We see a face that he wants everybody else to see, that he wants everybody else to believe is the real him. But we only see his true form once. And it is something so alien and so vastly different from anything that we have ever seen before that if we were to meet Kosh in real life or meet one of his species in real life, we would be so alien to him that he may not be able to trust us. Much in the same way that because he is so alien to us, but what I appreciate what GMS did with Kosh is the fact that while Kosh has all this power and all this knowledge and all this wonderful, faceted aspects to his character, he is first and foremost human. So, and I'll bring up Jeff B's comment here. Earth is 4.6 billion years old. The universe is 13 to 14 billion. So old ones should be a thing. I think what you mean to say, Jeff, is first ones. Jeff, here's the thing. This universe is massive. And to be so conceited in our thinking to believe that we are the only intelligent life in this entire universe, or at least in this entire galaxy, that's a conceit that I do not share. I would much rather live in a universe where there is a multitude of life forms, both benevolent and potentially malevolent. Because what's life without a little bit of danger? As long as you can handle it. But one of the other aspects that has had a profound effect upon me in terms of Babylon 5 influence upon me is its portrayal of the future. So, and before I move on, I want to say hello to the chat. DJ Ronnie. Ronnie, it is good to see you again. Been a little bit. But appreciate you stopping by this afternoon. So, and hope you're having a good day. Appreciate it. Growing up as a young kid and as a young man and now an older man, I always had great hopes for the future. And even considering everything that's going on in the world right now, I still do. And some people may say, well, I'm just a foolish dreamer who's just too stubborn and set in their ways to realize just how bad the world is around me. That very well may be true, but that is not how I necessarily see it. because the future that a series like Babylon 5 presents, while not completely ideal, and I hope that maybe before my eyes close to this world, that this world will turn around and become something better than what I came when I came into it. And honestly, that's what Babylon 5 does for me. It gives me hope for the future. That while we might go through strife and hardship and heartache, the future has the potential to be something far better than anything we have experienced now. And while I'm sure the world of Babylon 5, as we have seen throughout the series, is not perfect in a lot of respects, it's better than what we've got now. So, and also greetings to the chat, Sci-Fi Nation and Archer Cullen. Gentlemen, it is good to see you both. So, good afternoon and good evening. Good to see you. And if you're wondering where the rest of the council is, for those of you that are coming in a little bit late, um, no, the council has not disbanded. by no stretch has the council disbanded. But with everybody either on vacation or away at work or whatever the case may be, I felt it was more appropriate that rather than just canceling the stream altogether and missing another week, then I would just go solo today and just share my thoughts on why Babylon 5 what kind of influence and why it's had influence on me, why Babylon 5 has had this influence on me as a person and as a geek. And so so and I will bring up Ronnie's comment here. So any future with functioning fusion reactors is a step in the right direction. Ronnie, I wholeheartedly agree with you. And Archer Colin, it is good to see you, buddy. Even if you are a little bit late, don't worry. You can always catch this on the replay. You all know this. So I appreciate you being here, buddy. But honestly, Babylon 5 gives me hope. While my faith sustains me and also gives me hope, Babylon 5 gives me a picture of what the future could potentially look like. And I will say, by and large, the future that I see in Babylon 5 is a world that I would be fine to live in. It may have its issues, it may have its problems, obviously, with a character like Morgan Clark and Emperor Cartagia thrown into the mix, not to mention the shadows. But I would say that is a world I would be much I would be much happier in. And no, this is not me getting political or speaking on any social topics in particular, but it is a world that I would be much happier to live in now than the world that exists as it is, for the most part. I mean, obviously, in the Babylon 5 universe, strife and conflict and discord does exist. But there are a lot more people out there working to broker and foster coexistence and peace and diplomatic conversation and trying to work out their differences through the spoken word rather than at the end of a gun. That's a world where I would much rather live in, where it's the power of one's intellect and their ability to articulate it themselves than resorting to armed conflict. So, and that for me with Babylon 5 is one of the really big influences because it's a world that I can escape to that while it's not perfect, at several points throughout my life, it was a better world than the one I was currently living in. And I think that's something that appeals to all of us as human beings. We want to believe that the world will turn around and turn for the better. And series like Babylon 5, like Star Trek, maybe even to a certain degree like Star Wars, maybe. And so not insofar that it does have a message of hope, but not necessarily set in a factual universe as or a attainable universe per se in terms of technology and so on. But insofar that it's there is a tinge of hope rather than a tinge of despair and sorrow. So that for me is why I have been so fascinated by Babylon 5 since I first watched it all those years ago in syndication on late nights on Saturdays or anything after me and Mother and Bastard would get home from work. And that's one of the other things that I love about Babylon 5 so much is it's something that me and Mother and Bastard could share. It's something that we both enjoyed. It was a show that was very engaging, was always very enthralling and enrapturing because the universe that it presents was so different from from anything we had seen before. But at the same time, there was a hint of familiarity with it. Because even though you had all these various alien races in Babylon 5, like the Minbari and the Nard and the Centauri, the Pakmara, the Drazi, and so on, even though they looked alien deep down in their core, they were still human. They had that touch of humanity that dwells within them. They had their hopes, their dreams, and so on, and it is truly a wonderful thing to see um, be acted out, even if it's in a fictitious universe. And I want to send greetings to the chat. One of my fellow council members, one of the longest standing members of the Council of Ones, Mountains of Elysium. Hope you're having a very restful and a very peaceful vacation, my friend. It is good to see you in the chat. Appreciate you stopping by this evening while you are on vacation. And please give my regards to Mrs. Elysium and the entire family. And I hope you all have a great time and look forward to seeing you back with us next week. So, but there's one or two more points I want to bring up before I do wrap up this stream this afternoon, and just bear with me for a minute because there's a speech that I think is particularly appropriate here, in terms of what I'm discussing in terms of Babylon 5. And it's a speech from a past American president, one that I guess you could say I am a fan of. And that is, of course, JFK, John Fitzgerald Kennedy. So just give me a minute. I gotta look up the Kennedy speech. Um, Here it is. Here we go. Just give me a minute. I'm pulling up the text now, guys. Just it takes a minute. Now, this is a rather lengthy speech, but I think it should be at least in part read, and at least it should be read at least partly in its entirety. So, if you all will bear with me for a few minutes, this this is from Kennedy's speech at American University in 1963, June of 1963, just a few short months before his life would be taken. It is with great pride that I participate in the ceremony of the American University, sponsored by the Methodist Church, by Bishop John Fletcher Hurst, and first opened by President Woodrow Wilson in 1914. This is a young and growing university, but it has always fulfilled Bishop Hurst's enlightened hope for the study of history and public affairs in a city devoted to the making of history and to the conduct of the public's business. By sponsoring this institution of higher learning for all those who wish to learn, whatever their color or their creed, the Methodists of this area and the nation deserve the nation's thanks. I commend all those who are today graduating. Professor Woodrow Wilson once said that every man set out, or I guess to make this a little more appropriate, that every man or woman sent out from a university would be a man or woman for his or her nation as well as a man or woman of their time. And I'm confident that the men and women who carry the honor of graduating from this institution will continue to give from their lives, from their talent, a high measure of public service and public support. And he quotes, "There are few earthly things more beautiful than a university," written by John Masefield in his tribute to English universities. And his words are equally true today. He did not refer to towers or to campuses. He admired the splendid beauty of a university, but it is what he said, a place where those who hate ignorance may strive to know, where those who perceive truth may strive to make others see. I have therefore chosen this time and place to discuss a topic on which ignorance too often abounds and truth too rarely perceives. And that is the most important topic of earth: peace. What kind of peace do I mean? And what kind of peace do we seek? Not a Pax Americana enforced by the world on the world by American weapons of war. Not the peace of the grave or the security of the slave. I'm thinking about genuine peace, the kind of peace that makes life on earth worth living, the kind that enables men and women and nations to grow and to hope and to build a better life for their children. Not merely peace for Americans, but peace for all men and women. Not merely peace in our time, but peace in all time. I speak of peace because of the new face of war. Total war makes no sense in an age where great powers can maintain large and relatively invulnerable nuclear forces and refuse to surrender them without resort to those forces. It makes no sense in an age where a single nuclear weapon contains almost 10 times the explosive force delivered by all the Allied air forces in the Second World War. It makes no sense in an age where the deadly poisons produced by a nuclear exchange would be carried by wind and water and soil and seed to the far corners of the globe and to generations yet unborn. Today, the expenditure of billions of dollars every year on weapons acquired for the purpose of making sure we never need them is essential to the keeping of peace. but surely the acquisition of such idle stockpiles, which can only destroy and never create, is not only much less the most efficient means of assuring peace. I speak of peace, therefore, as the necessary, rational end of rational men. I realize that the pursuit of peace is not as dramatic as the pursuit of war, and frequently the words of the pursuer falls on deaf ears, but we have no more urgent task. Some say that it is useless to speak of peace or world law or world disarmament, and that it will be useless until the leaders of the Soviet Union adopt a more enlightened attitude. I hope they do. I believe we can help them do it. But I also believe that we must re examine our own attitude as individuals and as a nation. For our attitude is as essential as theirs. And every graduate of this school, every thoughtful citizen who despairs of war and wishes to bring peace, should begin to look inward by examining his or her own attitudes towards the possibilities of peace, towards the Soviet Union, towards the course of the Cold War, and towards freedom and peace here at home. First, examine our attitudes towards peace itself. Too many of us think it is impossible. Too many think it is unreal. But that is a dangerous, defeatist belief. It leads to the conclusion that war is inevitable, that mankind is doomed, that we are gripped by forces we cannot control. We need not accept that view. Our problems are man-made, therefore they can be solved by man. And man can be as big as he wants. No problem of human destiny is beyond human beings. Man's reason and spirit have often solved the seemingly unsolvable. And we believe we can do it. We believe they can do it again. I am not referring to the absolute, infinite concept of universal peace and goodwill of which some fantasies and fanatics dream. I do not deny the value of hopes and dreams, but we are merely inviting discouragement and incredulity by making that our only an immediate goal. Let's focus instead on more practical, more attainable peace, based not on a sudden revolution in human nature, but on a gradual evolution of human institutions, on a series of concrete actions and effective agreements which are in the interest of all concerned. There is no single, simple key to this peace. No grand or magic formula to be adopted by one or two powers. Genuine peace must be the product of many nations, the sum of many acts. It must be dynamic, not static, changing to meet the challenge of every generation. For peace is a process, a way of solving problems. With such a peace, there will still be quarrels and conflicting interests. as there are within families and nations. World peace, like community peace, does not require that each man love his neighbor. It requires only that we live together in a mutual tolerance, submitting their disputes to a just and peaceful settlement. And history teaches us that enmities between nations, as between individuals, does not last forever. However, fixed our likes and dislikes may seem, the tide of time and events will often bring surprising changes in relationships between nations and neighbors. So let us persevere. Peace need not be impractical, and war need not be inevitable. By defining our goals more clearly, by making it seem more manageable and less remote, we can help all people to see it, to draw hope from it, and move irresistibly forward. And second, let us examine our attitudes towards the Soviet Union and our other neighbors. It is discouraging to think that their leaders may actually believe that they're what their propagandists write. It is discouraging to read a recent authoritative Soviet text on military strategy and find on page after page wholly baseless and incredible claims such as the allegations that American imperialist circles are preparing to unleash different types of war, that there is a very real threat of a preventative war being unleashed by American imperialists against the Soviet Union, and that the political aims, and I quote, of the American imperialists are to enslave economically and politically the European and other capital countries and to achieve more dominance by means of aggressive war. Truly, as it was written long ago, the wicked flee when no man pursueth. It is sad to read that these Soviet statements to realize the extent of the gulf between us, but it is also a warning to the American people not to fall into the same traps as the Soviets, not to see only a distorted and desperate view of the other side, not to see conflict as inevitable, accommodations as impossible, and communication as little more than an exchange of threats. No government or social system is so evil that its people must be considered as lacking in virtue. As Americans, we find communism profoundly repugnant as a negation of personal freedom and dignity. But we still hail the Russian people for their many achievements in science and space, in economics and industrial growth, in culture, and the acts of courage. Among the many traits the American people of our two countries have in common, none is stronger than our mutual abhorrence of war, almost unique among the major world powers. We have never been at war with each other, and no nation in the history of battle ever suffered more than the Soviet Union suffered in the Second World War. At least 20 million lost their lives. Countless millions of homes and families were burned or sacked. A third of the nation's territory, including 2/3 of its industrial base, were turned into a wasteland. A loss equivalent to the destruction of this country's east of Chicago. Today, should total war ever break out again, no matter how, our two countries will be the primary target. It is an ironic but accurate fact that the two strongest powers are two of them are in the most danger of devastation. All we have built, all we have worked for, would be destroyed in the first 24 hours. And even in the Cold War, which brings burdens and dangers to so many countries, including this nation's closest allies, our two countries bear the heaviest burdens. For we are both devoting massive sums of money to weapons that could be better devoted to combat ignorance, poverty, and disease. We are both caught up in a vicious and dangerous cycle, with suspicion on one side breeding suspicion on the other, and new weapons begetting counterweapons. In short, both the United States and its allies and the Soviet Union and its allies have a mutual deep interest in a just and genuine peace, and in halting the arms race. Agreement to this end are in the interests of the Soviet Union as well as ours. And even the most hostile nation can be relied upon to accept and keep these treaties' obligations. And only these treaties' obligations which are in their own interest. So let's not be blind in our difference, but let's also direct attention to our common interest and the means by which those differences can be resolved. If we cannot end our differences, at least we can help make the world safe for diversity. For in the final analysis, our most basic common link is that we all inhabit this small planet. We all breathe the same air. We all cherish our children's futures. And we are all mortal. From the pen of John Fitzgerald Kennedy, President of the United States. Let's see, JFK had speechwriters if he didn't do it himself. JFK did have speechwriters, but let's be candid here. I would imagine JFK was as articulate without a speechwriter as he was with one. And while I haven't done the full history on this speech, I think it is one of his best. The man was a very articulate and very well-spoken orator, and despite some of the mistakes he made in his short presidency, he was one of the last greats. Let's see, what am I? So seeing what I'm missing in the chat here. So talk of peas and so on, and what have you. JFK was my first president. Well, Jeff B, I will say this: I would be remiss if I would say that I am just a little envious. Yeah, though I was too young to remember. Well, anyways, the reason I wanted to bring up that speech, and part of the reasons why I wanted to read part of it to you all, is because Kennedy was a man, though he had to suffer through war. I think his experience in war made him realize just how costly it was. And I think in a lot of ways, though I can't verify any of this, I think Straczynski was influenced maybe just a little bit by Kennedy in real life. or in his writing and his creation of Babylon 5. And I will say this of the creator of Babylon 5, JMS, J. Michael Straczynski, though he has done numerous things in his career as a writer, be it in comic books or television series, in particular Babylon 5, or whatever the case may be, he has inspired me as a writer myself. Because in crafting my Star Wars fan fiction, I tried to take a touch of inspiration from JMS and say, what would he put in here? And though I doubt JMS will ever see this live stream, I owe him a small debt of gratitude and inspiration, because it is his skills and abilities as a writer that inspired me to put as much time and effort and figurative blood, sweat, and tears into my own writing that he no doubt put into his own. And I would say that in the characters of Jeffrey Sinclair and John Sheridan, and perhaps even Susan Ivanova, I imagine other characters were inspired by JFK. We see flashes of this American president. And as I said, one of the few great ones that were one of the last of the great ones. One of the truly noteworthy leaders of this nation. So, but with all that being said, folks, I'm gonna go ahead and wrap up here for this afternoon. As I mentioned before, this council and myself will be back next week. We will be continuing our review of season 5 of Babylon 5. I do want to let you all know that I will be going live this weekend. I have not yet decided what day I'm going to go live, whether it'll be tomorrow evening or Sunday evening. But we're going to be doing a return to form for the ambassadorial wing in particular, and going to be discussing a topic that is I think of interest to quite a few, particularly those of us who are children of the 80s. And we're going to be talking about some of our favorite science fiction films from the 1980s, both the well-known and the obscure, the campy and the epic. So I will let you all know on social media once I do have that stream set up, and I hope to see many of you there. I may make this a open panel. We'll drop the link into the chat and everything for those of you that want to join me for this stream. And bring your sci-fi caps with you as we delve into the great sci-fi films, both, like I said, both epic and campy of the 1980s. So, but anyways, folks, that all being said, you all have a great afternoon or a great evening wherever you are at. And until next time, this is the Ambassador, signing off.
I have always been